Hello everyone! Welcome back to the channel. It feels so good to have you here again. Today, I'm taking you on a brand new journey across Japan, a country that I've been exploring for more than a decade. Every time I come here, I feel like I uncover a new layer of its culture, its quiet beauty, and its everyday life. And this trip, which begins in April 2024, is no exception. Now, before I dive into the details, let me just say this. If you've been enjoying these journeys with me, don't forget to give this video a like and share it with your friends and family. It really helps me keep creating and bringing you along on these adventures. All right, let's begin. We landed at Narita International Airport on April 5th. For those who may not know, Narita is one of Tokyo's two main international gateways, the other being Haneda. Narita lies a bit farther from central Tokyo, but its facilities and connections are extremely efficient. I've passed through this airport many times, and there's always something comforting about its polished yet understated Japanese design. This time, the landing was smooth, the immigration process swift, and before I knew it, I was standing with my suitcase, ready to step back into the rhythm of Japan. Why did I choose early April for this journey? Well, here's a little insider tip that comes with years of traveling in Japan. Most tourists plan their visits around peak cherry blossom season, which usually hits Tokyo from late March to early April. During that time, flights, hotels, and even restaurants can get crowded and expensive, so I deliberately planned to arrive just after the official peak. My hope was to avoid the throngs of visitors while still catching glimpses of blossoms lingering here and there. But, as travel often surprises us, this year's cooler climate delayed the bloom. By arriving on April 5th, I had unknowingly timed my visit perfectly, walking straight into Japan's pink-petaled magic. But without the overwhelming crowds, a little bit of travel luck never hurts. By the time we cleared immigration, it was around 400 p.m. We hopped on the Narita Express, switched to the local subway, and eventually made our way toward Ofuna, a town just north of Kamakura. By the time we surfaced above ground, night had already fallen. There's always something magical about that first evening in Japan, the neon lights, the aroma of grilled food wafting through narrow alleyways, and the quiet hum of trains pulling in and out of nearby stations. It feels both familiar and fresh every time. For our first night, I chose a hotel near Ofuna Station. Now, I've stayed at this chain before in central Tokyo, specifically near Kanda's historic Book Street. The reason I picked it again is simple efficiency. Japanese business hotels may not be the most luxurious, but they're compact, clean, and incredibly practical. Most of them have automated check-in machines in multiple languages, so you don't need to worry about language barriers. Swipe your passport, insert your credit card, and within a few minutes, you're handed a key card to your room. It's seamless, perfect after a long flight when you just want to settle in quickly. The room itself, minimalist. As expected, a bed that takes up most of the space, a small bathroom designed with Tetris-like precision, and just enough room for your suitcase. Yet there's a certain charm in this efficiency. You realize quickly that you don't need a sprawling suite to feel comfortable. In Japan, space is used thoughtfully, and every little detail from the folding desk to the instant hot water kettle adds to the feeling of quiet order. Once we dropped our bags, hunger began to set in. That's the thing about arriving in Japan. Your senses immediately get pulled in by food. Step outside the hotel, and the alleys are alive with the sizzling sounds of yakitori, the sight of steaming bowls of ramen, and the comforting glow of lanterns outside izakayas. I always say that choosing where to eat in Japan is like walking into an art gallery. You're overwhelmed by options, and every corner promises something special. That evening, we wandered through the narrow streets near Ofuna Station, peeking into one restaurant after another. Each place looked tempting, a ramen shop with thick noodles curling in broth, a tiny counter izakaya filled with locals laughing over sake, even a small joint selling Enoden Japan's comforting winter stew. I kept ranking them silently in my mind, trying to decide, but as often happens when you're hungry, choice becomes impossible. Eventually, we ducked into a random spot without overthinking. And that's the beauty of eating in Japan. You don't really need to research every restaurant. Even a no-name place on the corner will usually serve you a meal prepared with pride and balance. That night, we ordered Enoden with konjac and fatty pork sausage, a dish that warmed us from the inside out. Sitting there, sipping miso soup and nibbling on skewers, I couldn't help but smile. This is what I love most about Japan, the way even a simple meal can feel like a gentle embrace. On the way back to the hotel, I stumbled upon one of those capsule toy machines, the gachapon. I couldn't resist. I twisted the knob and out popped a tiny figurine. It's such a small ritual, but it never fails to spark joy. In Japan, even the tiniest details of daily life like gachapon or the convenience of a corner store remind you that life doesn't have to be grand to be fulfilling. Speaking of corner stores, we stopped by a convenience store beneath the hotel. I picked up a can of beer, the kind that comes with a full removable lid. This design is unique to Japan. When you pop the lid, it foams up vigorously, spilling a little over the edges, creating that frothy head you'd normally only get when pouring draft beer. Sitting in my room with that can, munching on a packet of Japanese snacks, I realised that these are the kinds of moments that truly make travel special. Not just the famous temples or the iconic landmarks, but the ordinary evenings, the quiet, unplanned rituals that remind you you're in a different world. And so, that was our first night back in Japan. Tomorrow, the real adventure would begin walking the famous cherry blossom paths of Kamakura, visiting shrines with centuries of history, and diving deeper into this healing journey. But for that first evening, all I needed was a warm meal, a small toy from a gachapon machine, and a foamy Japanese beer to remind me that I was exactly where I needed to be. Part 2. The morning walk, cherry blossoms, and the spirit of Tsurugaoka Hachimangu. Good morning, everyone. When I woke up the next day in Ofuna, I could still feel the jet lag lingering in my body. But, as any seasoned traveller will tell you, sometimes the best way to beat fatigue is to step out early, before the rest of the city wakes up. So, at 5:15 a.m., we left the hotel, stepping into streets that were still half asleep, wrapped in that soft stillness only found in Japanese mornings. The alleys we had walked through the night before were now unrecognizable. The glow of lanterns and laughter of izakayas had vanished, replaced by shuttered storefronts and the faint cawing of crows circling above. It felt as though the stage of the previous night's play had been struck down, leaving behind an empty set. I love this duality in Japan, the vibrant, almost chaotic nightlife, and then the disciplined, orderly calm of the early morning. Both sides coexist, balancing each other perfectly. We hopped on the local train toward Kamakura. The plan for the morning was simple: walk the famous Wakamiya Ōji Avenue, also called the Spine of Kamakura, and then visit the Great Tsurugaoka Hachimangu Shrine. Now, a little bit of context. Kamakura is often referred to as the Kyoto of Eastern Japan. It was once the political capital under the Kamakura shogunate in the 12th and 13th centuries. As such, it's filled with historic shrines, temples, and trails that tell stories of Japan's samurai age. If Kyoto reflects the grace of the imperial court, Kamakura carries the spirit of the warrior. The walk from the station toward Hachimangu Shrine is legendary during spring. This road is lined with cherry trees on both sides, forming a corridor of blossoms that, at their peak, turn into a pink tunnel overhead. I've seen many sakura spots in Japan Osaka Castle, Kyoto's Philosopher's Path, even the famous Meguro River in Tokyo, but there's something special about Kamakura's Wakamiya Ōji. Perhaps it's the way the blossoms frame the approach to the shrine, blending natural beauty with centuries of spirituality. That morning, the weather was cloudy. The blossoms weren't quite at their fullest yet, but enough petals had opened to paint the air with delicate shades of pink. Walking beneath them, I tried to imagine how it must look on a clear day, with blue skies and sunlight filtering through the blossoms. Even without the sunshine, there was a hushed beauty. Locals jogged quietly past us. Old couples walked hand in hand, and the air smelled faintly of damp earth and flowers. Here's something I've learned after years of traveling in Japan. Cherry blossoms aren't only about their peak beauty. They're also about the anticipation before full bloom and the poignancy as petals begin to fall. The Japanese concept of mono, no aware, an awareness of impermanence is deeply tied to this. It's not just the blossoms themselves, but the fleetingness of their moment that makes them so precious. That morning in Kamakura, I felt that truth intensely. At the end of the road stood the great red Torii Gate, the entrance to Tsurugaoka Hachimangu Shrine. This shrine was founded in 1180 by Minamoto no Yoritomo, the first shogun of the Kamakura shogunate, dedicated to Hachiman, the god of war and the divine protector of the samurai. It became the spiritual heart of the warrior class. Walking through the gate, I could almost imagine the countless samurai who had once passed here, seeking blessings before battle. The shrine grounds are expansive. There's a lower area with smaller shrines dedicated to different deities. And then, after climbing a steep set of stone steps, you reach the main hall, perched high above the city. Before we began the climb, though, I paused to look at the small wooden plaques that visitors write their wishes on before hanging them at the shrine. Are one of my favorite aspects of Japanese spirituality. Each plaque is a personal postcard to the future, carrying hopes of success, love, health, or happiness. Standing in front of hundreds of them, I felt like I was peeking into the collective heart of humanity. Some wishes were written in Japanese, others in Chinese, English, or Korean, even though I couldn't understand every word. The essence was universal, people yearning for a brighter tomorrow. And that, to me, is the quiet power of places like this. They remind us that despite cultural differences, human hopes are remarkably alike. Climbing the stone steps up to the main hall, I felt the burn in my legs. It's a steep climb, but worth every step. At the top, the view stretched over the long avenue we had just walked, framed by cherry blossoms and the bustle of early visitors below. The main hall itself radiated dignity, its vermilion beams standing proudly against the grey sky. I took a few moments to bow, clap, and silently offer a wish. Whether or not one believes in the literal presence of gods, the ritual itself feels grounding. After leaving the main hall, we wandered down to Komachi Street, a lively shopping street that runs nearby. But it was still early, and most shops were closed. The air was crisp, the wind occasionally sharp, and my thin jacket wasn't quite enough to keep me warm. Eventually, we stumbled into a small Western-style cafe that had already opened its doors. Inside, the warmth was immediate. I ordered coffee with milk and a thick slice of toast, topped with melted cheese and potato salad, an example of Japan's unique take on Western breakfast. It might sound simple, but after hours of walking in the chilly morning air, it was the most satisfying meal I could imagine. Japan has a way of taking something familiar and reimagining it with subtle adjustments. A toast isn't just a toast. It's crafted with care, balanced with textures, and portioned to feel complete. As I sipped my coffee, I reflected on the morning so far. From the pink tunnel of cherry blossoms to the solemn steps of Hachimangu Shrine, it felt like I had already experienced a full day of travel, and yet it was only mid-morning. That's another thing about Japan, it teaches you to slow down, to observe, and to find meaning in the smallest details. By the time we finished breakfast, the day was just beginning. The plan was to continue toward the coast, following the tracks of the Enoden tram, one of the most scenic rail lines in Japan. But before reaching the sea, Kamakura still had more stories to share, stories of tiny sparrows in sweaters, of anime fame at a railway crossing, and of the quiet, hurling power of the ocean. Part 3. Along the Enoden line, sparrows in sweaters, Enoshima, and the slam dunk crossing. After finishing our warm breakfast on Komachi Street, we made our way back toward the station to catch one of my favorite modes of transport in Japan, the Enoden tram. For seasoned travelers like me, the Enoden line is more than just public transportation. It's a journey in itself, weaving through the everyday lives of Kamakura's residents while offering breathtaking glimpses of the coast. The tram itself is modest, often just a few carriages long, painted in classic green with golden trim. It feels like stepping into a scene from an old film. What makes the Enoden special is how it moves. It doesn't run on elevated tracks, nor does it speed underground like Tokyo's subways. Instead, it cuts straight through neighborhoods, sliding past houses where laundry hangs on balconies, squeezing between narrow alleys, and sometimes running so close to people's homes that you feel like you could reach out and touch their walls. Every bend in the tracks reveals a new scene. One moment, you're in a dense residential street. The next, you're gliding past bamboo groves, and soon after, you're suddenly staring at the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. If you ever ride the Enoden, here's a little tip stand at the very front of the first carriage. The view is unmatched, watching the tracks unravel before you, with the conductor working just a few steps away. You get a sense of intimacy that modern high-speed trains can't offer. As we rode toward Enoshima, we stopped briefly at Koshigoe Station, not for a landmark or a temple, but for something far smaller, yet deeply touching. Outside the station, on the guardrail, stood 8 little metal sparrows. At first glance, they might seem like simple decorations, but look closer, and you'll notice that each sparrow is wearing a tiny, hand-knitted sweater. This tradition began in 1999 when a local resident, Mrs. Seiko Ishikawa, noticed the bare metal birds sitting exposed in the rain, sun and wind. She felt pity for them and decided to knit them small sweaters. Since then, the birds have never been left naked. For decades, Ishikawa-san lovingly dressed them in seasonal outfits, bright colours for spring, warm tones for autumn, perhaps even festive patterns for the holidays. After she passed away, her friend, Mrs. Koike, continued the practice to honour her memory. And so today, the sparrows are always cared for, their outfits changed regularly by kind hands, standing there, Watching locals stop to smile at the sparrows, I felt something stir inside me. Travel often bombards us with grand monuments and sweeping landscapes. But here, in the quiet act of knitting sweaters for a set of metal birds, was something profoundly human. It was a reminder that beauty and kindness often live in the smallest gestures. That's the kind of story I treasure most after more than a decade of travel. From Koshigoe, the tram carried us closer to the coast. Soon, we arrived at Enoshima. Now, Enoshima is a small island connected to the mainland by a bridge, famous for its shrines, caves, and panoramic views of Mount Fuji on clear days. Originally, we had planned to cross over and explore, but the sky that morning was still heavy with clouds, and Fuji was nowhere to be seen. So, we made the decision to skip it this time. That's another lesson from years of travel sometimes. You don't need to force every stop on your itinerary if the timing isn't right. It's better to leave it for another trip. In fact, I like to think of these missed opportunities as travel bookmarks. They give me a reason to return. Instead, we decided to walk along the seaside stretch of the Enoden tracks toward what has become one of Kamakura's most famous modern landmarks, the Slam Dunk Crossing. If you grew up in the 1990s or early 2000s, you might remember Slam Dunk, a beloved Japanese basketball manga and anime. One of its most iconic opening scenes features a railway crossing by the sea, with the tram passing by and waves crashing in the background. That spot exists in real life right here in Kamakura, near Koshigoe Station. When we arrived, sure enough, dozens of fans were gathered with cameras, waiting to capture the moment a train rolled past the crossing. Some even tried to recreate poses from the anime, standing with basketballs or leaning dramatically against the fence. It was fun to watch, but I also couldn't help noticing the tension it creates for local residents. This crossing is part of their daily commute, yet every day it becomes a stage for tourists and anime fans. Police officers often remind visitors not to block traffic. It's a fascinating intersection of pop culture and real life, and a reminder of how fictional stories can immortalize real places. The crossing itself is beautiful, though, standing there, you can hear the bell ringing as the barrier lowers. See the Enoden tram glide past, and beyond it, the endless blue of the Pacific. On clear days, Mount Fuji looms majestically in the distance, completing a picture-perfect scene. Unfortunately for us, the clouds stubbornly lingered, muting the colours and hiding Fuji. Still, there was something poetic about it. Not every day has to be picture-perfect. Sometimes, the muted tones carry their own kind of beauty. After spending some time at the crossing, we continued walking along the sea. The smell of salt water mixed with the faint scent of grilled seafood from stalls near the shore. Couples strolled by hand in hand. Surfers carried boards toward the waves, and students in uniforms biked past us with the ease of everyday life. This is what I love most about Kamakura's coastal stretch. It's not just a tourist attraction. It's a living place where locals go about their tours. To me, that blend of extraordinary scenery with ordinary life is what makes Japan endlessly fascinating. The country has this way of letting the sacred and the everyday coexist without conflict. A shrine can stand beside a convenience store, an anime scene illuminates it. And it all is natural. By midnight, clouds showed no sign of lifting. So we turned our attention inland again, ready to explore Kamakura's temples. What awaited us were centuries-old halls, courtyards painted with cherry blossoms, and the quiet company of 1,000 small stone statues. But before that, I paused one last time to watch the Enoden tram pass by. The green carriage disappeared into the distance, hugging the coastline. And I thought to myself, if you ever want to feel Japan's soul, not the Tokyo of neon lights, nor the Kyoto of polished temples, but something raw and human, ride the Enoden. It will show you the Japan that lives quietly between the famous spots. Part 4, Hase-dera, the Temple of Seasons, and 1,000 Jizō, leaving the coast behind. We made our way inland again, following narrow streets that wound between traditional houses, small cafes, and souvenir shops. Soon, the green rooflines of Hase-dera, also called Shokubuji, came into view. This temple is one of Kamakura's treasures, a place where spirituality and seasonal beauty flow seamlessly together. Hase-dera belongs to the Jizō sect of Buddhism and dates back more than 300 years. Legend has it that in the 8th century, a monk carved 2 massive statues of the Bodhisattva Kannon, the goddess of mercy, from a single camphor tree. One of those statues was enshrined here in Kamakura, while the other drifted by sea to Nara. Whether myth or history, the story adds to the temple's aura of mystery and sacredness. As we entered the temple grounds, the first thing I noticed was how carefully the landscape was designed. Japanese temple gardens are not accidental. They're deliberate expressions of harmony between humans and nature. At Hase-dera, winding paths lead you past ponds dotted with koi, groves of plum trees, and small stone lanterns covered in moss. Every season transforms this place into a different painting. In spring, cherry blossoms scatter their petals across the courtyards. In summer, hydrangeas explode into blue and purple. Autumn sets the hillsides ablaze with fiery red leaves, and winter, though quieter, brings the delicate charm of blooming plum blossoms. On this April day, cherry blossoms still lingered, creating a soft canopy over the walkways. Their petals swirled in the breeze, floating down into the pond, where koi fish broke the surface with gentle ripples. I paused for a moment to breathe it in. After more than a decade of traveling through Japan, I've learned that these small pauses are essential. Rushing through a temple would mean missing its soul. The highlight of Hase-dera is, without question, the 11-headed Kannon statue housed in the main hall. Standing over 9 meters tall, it is one of the largest wooden statues in Japan. Unfortunately, photography isn't allowed inside, so I can't show you an image, but in some ways, that makes the encounter more powerful. Standing before Kannon, surrounded by the faint scent of incense, I felt a quiet weight in the air. The 11 heads are said to represent her ability to see and hear the suffering of all beings. As I looked up, I thought about how many people over the centuries had come here, offering prayers in times of hardship, joy, or uncertainty. That continuity of faith is humbling. Outside the main hall, the temple grounds offer even more to discover. One of the most moving areas is Jizō-do, a small space dedicated to Jizō Bodhisattva, the guardian of children and travelers. Here, you find rows upon rows of tiny stone statues, thousands of them standing shoulder to shoulder. Each one represents a child lost. Whether through miscarriage, stillbirth, or illness, parents place these statues here in hope that Jizō will guide their children safely in the afterlife. Walking through the sea of Jizō statues, I felt a profound silence. It wasn't a silence of emptiness, but of deep reverence. Many statues were adorned with small red bibs or knitted hats, offerings of love from grieving parents. Some held tiny toys, plastic cars, dolls, or even little origami cranes. In a world that often hides grief, Hase-dera offers a place where love and loss are visible, honored and sanctified. Nearby, there's also a Mizuko Jizō statue where visitors can pour water over the figure with a wooden ladle. This act symbolizes purification and compassion, a way of easing sorrow while connecting with something larger than oneself. I watched as a young woman quietly poured water over the statue, her movements deliberate, almost meditative. These moments are why I keep coming back to Japan, not just for the beauty, but for the way rituals allow everyday people to connect with emotions too complex for words. Climbing further up the hillside, we reached an observation deck called Jizō. From here, the view opened wide, revealing Kamakura's residential neighborhoods below and the coastline stretching into the distance. I love these vantage points. They remind me that travel is not only about seeing landmarks up close, but also about gaining perspective, literally. Looking out over the rooftops, I noticed how varied the houses were. Unlike many Western suburbs where homes look uniform, Japanese neighborhoods are a patchwork of individuality. Roof tiles in grey, red or brown walls of wood, concrete or plaster, tiny vegetable gardens squeezed between houses. It's a visual reminder that Japan thrives on subtle variety rather than strict sameness. Before leaving, we explored one final area of Hase-dera, the Benten-kutsu Caves. These are narrow, winding tunnels carved into the hillside, dimly lit by flickering candles. Inside, statues of Benzaiten, the goddess of music and wealth, are enshrined. The walls of the cave are lined with small carvings of Buddhist deities, creating an atmosphere that feels both intimate and otherworldly. Walking through, I couldn't help but think of the monks who once used caves like these for meditation, retreating from the noise of the world to seek inner clarity. Emerging from the cave, daylight felt almost startling. The contrast between the shadowed stillness inside and the sunlit gardens outside mirrored the duality I often feel when traveling in Japan, an interplay between the mystical and the mundane, the ancient and the modern. As we made our way back toward the entrance, I reflected on how Hase-dera embodies so many facets of Japanese spirituality: compassion through Kannon, guardianship through Jizō, reverence for nature through its gardens, and introspection through its caves. It's not just a temple, it's a mosaic of human experience, carefully preserved across centuries. After leaving Hase-dera, we weren't quite finished with Kamakura's religious wonders. Just a short walk away waited the city's most iconic figure, the Great Buddha of Kotoku Inn, standing nearly 14 meters tall. Cast in bronze, he has watched over Kamakura for more than 700 years. But that story deserves its own chapter. Part 5, The Great Buddha. Clay pot rice, and a monorail ride through the sky. Leaving Hase-dera behind, we followed the steady flow of visitors toward another of Kamakura's great treasures, the Daibutsu, or Great Buddha of Kotoku Inn. If Hase-dera represents the intimate, compassionate side of Buddhism, then the Daibutsu embodies its grandeur and resilience. The path leading to the temple complex was lined with shops selling matcha ice cream, manju buns filled with red bean paste, and small souvenirs shaped like the Buddha himself. It was a lively contrast to the quiet reverence of Hase-dera. And then, as we passed through the temple gates, he appeared. The Great Buddha stands over 13 meters tall, weighing about 121 tons. Cast in bronze in the mid-13th century, he has endured centuries of storms, earthquakes, and even the destruction of the wooden hall that once sheltered him. Today, he sits in the open air, calm and unshaken, as if weather itself were just another fleeting wave in the ocean of time. Standing before him, I felt small not just physically, but existentially. Here was a figure who had witnessed more than 7 centuries of history, the rise and fall of shogunates, the fires of war, the quiet persistence of ordinary life. His half-closed eyes seemed to hold a wisdom beyond human years, a reminder that everything we chase, ambition, possessions, even travel, is ultimately transient. Yet, rather than feeling heavy, the experience was strangely comforting. To stand before the Great Buddha is to be reminded that there's value in stillness, in being present even as the world shifts around us. Visitors lined up to enter the hollow interior of the statue, where you can see the bronze casting from the inside. It's a fascinating look at the craftsmanship of the Kamakura period. But for me, the most profound experience came simply from sitting on a bench nearby, watching the Buddha framed by swaying pine trees and drifting clouds. After years of chasing sights around the globe, I've come to appreciate these moments of quiet observation. By the time we left Kotoku Inn, our stomachs were rumbling. Fortunately, Kamakura is not only a place of temples, but also of culinary delights. For lunch, we headed to a small local restaurant specializing in kamameshi clay pot rice. Now, let me explain why this dish is so special. Unlike regular steamed rice, kamameshi is cooked in individual clay pots over an open flame. As the rice cooks, it absorbs the flavors of the broth, vegetables, and proteins layered on top. The result is fragrant, slightly crispy at the bottom, and deeply satisfying. I ordered the Thai sea bream set, and when it arrived, the aroma alone was intoxicating. The rice was fluffy yet rich, each grain infused with the delicate sweetness of the fish. The sea bream itself was tender, almost melting on the tongue. A drizzle of soy sauce added depth, while side dishes of pickles and miso soup balanced the meal. After hours of walking, every bite felt like fuel for both body and spirit. One of the joys of travel in Japan is discovering how much care goes into even the simplest meals. This wasn't Michelin-starred cuisine. It was an everyday dish, elevated through patience and tradition. I've eaten clay pot rice in other countries, but the Japanese version carries a precision and balance that feels uniquely their own. By the time we finished, the afternoon light was beginning to soften. We decided to head back toward Ofuna, but instead of taking the usual train, we chose something far more unusual, the Shonan monorail. The Shonan monorail isn't like the sleek, elevated monorails you might find in other cities. Instead, it's a suspended system, meaning the carriages hang beneath the track rather than riding above it. The effect is thrilling. As the monorail glides out of the station, you suddenly feel like you're floating through the sky, houses and trees rushing past beneath your feet. The ride connects Ofuna Station with Enoshima, winding through hills, tunnels, and neighborhoods. At times, the acceleration gives it the feel of a roller coaster, especially if you're seated at the front. Looking out the wide windows, I couldn't help grinning. It was transportation, yes, but also a playful reminder that travel should be fun. After years of moving from one airport to another, one high-speed train to the next, the Shonan monorail felt refreshingly whimsical. By the time we returned to Ofuna, the day was catching up with us. We retreated to the hotel for a brief rest, but as evening fell, the promise of dinner drew us back out. Tonight's choice: a conveyor belt sushi restaurant within walking distance. Now, if you've never experienced kaiten sushi, it's worth putting on your list. Plates of sushi glide past on a rotating belt, each priced according to color or design. You simply pick what you like, stacking plates as you go. It's casual, efficient, and often surprisingly high quality. We started with maguro tuna. The staple of any sushi meal. First came akami, the lean red cut, clean and fresh. Then chutoro, the medium fatty belly, marbled just enough to melt on the tongue. Finally, otoro, the richest cut, decadent and buttery. Each bite was paired with a sip of warm sake, the heat spreading from my stomach to my fingertips, warding off the chill of the spring night. As the plates stacked higher, I thought back on the day, from the serenity of Hase-dera to the majesty of the Great Buddha, from the homeliness of clay pot rice to the thrill of the monorail. Kamakura had revealed itself as more than just a historic city. It was a place where the past and present live side by side, where spirituality and everyday life are inseparable. And that, perhaps, is what makes Japan so endlessly compelling. It doesn't force you to choose between the sacred and the ordinary, the grand and the small. Instead, it invites you to see how they weave together: a knitted sweater for sparrows, a towering statue of Buddha, a can of foamy beer from a convenience store, a bite of sushi at the end of the day. They all belong to the same story. As we walked back to the hotel under the quiet glow of street lamps, I felt deeply content. After more than 10 years of traveling here, Japan still manages to surprise me, to humble me, to remind me why I fell in love with travel in the first place. Kamakura, with its temples, coastlines, and hidden stories, had once again proven that the most memorable journeys aren't just about the places you see, but the way those places change the way you see yourself. Tomorrow, another adventure would begin. But for tonight, all I needed was the lingering taste of sushi, the warmth of sake, and the quiet certainty that travel, at its best, is not just about moving through the world, it's about letting the world move through you.